So this is part 2 of my conversation with Dave Iannetta, where we focus on how to market a little bit differently depending on what stage funding you're at.
I think one risk that I've seen companies kind of go down the wrong path is bundling up all those sort of market feedback questions and waiting every 6 months or longer to bounce those off of physicians. That is far too long. You need to be able to have those discussions quick on a text message. Hey, what do you think about this idea? Is this crazy?
So our focus today is going to be on working with venture capitalists and where your focus as a marketer should be then.
A lot of the venture fund managers, they're ex-physicians themselves. So there's a comfort level there. And when they see you as willing to invest your time in them, they're willing to invest in the time back. And that's how you build those relationships. It's not a sort of one-shot transactional approach.
Welcome to Lifesci Continuum. Let's go. So let's talk about the next level of investing. So we get a little bit less complex in our communications there.
Yeah, I would say that the next phase, thinking about sort of broader venture investors. My experience on the venture side of things is that I think they tend to have a lot of comfort in the physician community, right? So it's almost like you could think about the angel phase being perhaps very clinic or lab driven type work. In the venture stage, now you're probably getting into humans. So you have physicians that you're working with. You've kind of gotten to that level where you're going to start having those conversations. And a lot of the venture fund managers, they're ex physicians themselves. So there's a comfort level there in both the treatments, the various patient populations, and being able to have those discussions now, which is quite different than being able to say, look, these are the types of benchtop tests that we're gonna do. And that to me is how the conversation continues to evolve. You're getting closer to the market, so you're having more and more discussions about the kind of physician and patient engagement side of things.
Now, are they strictly supporting you with writing a check, or do they offer additional value at this stage?
The best opportunities are the ones that do offer that kind of added value, because at that stage you're trying to grow rapidly to build the business, and those investors can be a massive leverage point to allow you to scale. They could have experience with other outside partners, other types of firms or consultants that they've seen, worked with, CROs, for example. As you're getting into the clinic, now you need to start leveraging things like that. They can bring a lot of experience to the table in those sorts of things, just because of the broad breadth that they have across other portfolio companies, right? Even just making connections with other portfolio companies so that you can have those discussions is a big value.
Yeah, partnerships is huge. We worked with a company. We were brought in to help them refine some messaging and repositioning. And one of the challenges that they faced across the board was they were operating as a contract manufacturer, but they were also developing their own therapy. And they had a mix of investors, and just resoundingly, the message to the client was, figure out who you want to be, pick a direction and pursue it. And there were so many choices in front of them. It was really hard for them to decide and choose a strategy. And so in tapping into the investors network, they were able to bring in some consultants that helped them decide where maybe their best opportunity was, which then made, positioning and messaging much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. As a small company, a lot of what you're doing is building that network of certainly people, but also companies that you're partnering with. And, it's just like interviewing people for roles. You're essentially interviewing companies to partner with, and having, a good recommendation goes a long way in terms of, you go down like outsourced manufacturing, for example, you're starting to ramp up. You need to get your early builds together on products. Having that sort of strong reference point can save you so much time and effort because you spend a lot of time going down a path. If you then have to stop and rework and go to someone else, it just sets you back. And that time is cash burn, and you're always managing that. So the faster you can move that process along, the better it is.
What do you think is most important to message at that point if you're trying to communicate, thinking about this, looking at it through the lens of, the founder's eyes or through marketing? What do you think, if you were to be a little bit prescriptive, what is key to focus on at this stage?
Yeah, to me, I think at this stage, there's a strong need for the sort of clinical validation by the physicians, right? So it could be, bringing in sort of an advisory board, gathering up a lot of their thoughts and quotes or headshots or, whatever, and building that into the talking points of a slide deck. At that point in the game, I would expect to see a lot of physician engagement, maybe even patient engagement. There's, depending on the disease state, there might be pre-existing patient advocacy groups. Those are good to tap into and have them help validate the clinical relevance of the treatment. Those types of things, I think, are important boxes to check, right? To really have that as, because by that stage in the game, you need some external validation that this isn't just our idea, but other people have kind of validated the need and the opportunity.
So thinking about that for a second, put your feet to the fire. If you had to build some credibility in the space with clinicians, surgeons, whoever,
I think it's tapping into experience in the space is important. So if, let's say, I'm brand new into a therapeutic area, my first step at that point is to go and talk to as many physicians as I can get in front of, but also other industry people who work in the space. So you certainly need to do some networking to figure out, hey, who are the company friendly physicians that do this kind of work? Some kind of are frequently on that side of the fence with consulting opportunities. Others are less so. And you have to figure out kind of where the deep water lies in terms of going after some of those opportunities. But I would say right out of the gate, it's time at trade shows, it's spending time in physician offices, and getting to know them. And I think that's where, as a marketer, you need to be very comfortable in those environments, having those discussions to go out and be able to go toe to toe with the physicians and have the debates about the product and the needs. And then you kind of take all that information and synthesize it into a story. I mean, that's part of the process, but you have to kind of gather all the grist for the mill, really, in terms of going out and having those conversations.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things we always look for is voice of the customer. Yep. And even if you don't have customers yet, you find a way to connect with future customers. There's, somebody out there is always in some stage of being a customer, and getting in front of them ahead at this early stage can save you a lot of headache further down the line.
Absolutely. And if you're not doing that at that stage of the game, you are going to be sorely behind the game when you really need it. You need to have that sort of broad base of connections so that as day-to-day questions come up, you can bounce those. You don't want to. I think one risk that I've seen companies kind of go down the wrong path is bundling up all those sort of market feedback questions and waiting take a pick 6 months or longer to bounce those off of physicians. That is far too long.
That's so long.
Yeah. You need to be able to have those discussions quick on a text message. Hey, what do you think about this idea? Is this crazy? No, that's how I'd like. And sometimes it can be really simple things. Obviously for more complex discussions, sure, you're going to pull together like an advisory board meeting. You're going to talk it through. That's fine. But you need to have those quick conversations frequently.
Give me an example of that. So we're sort of talking high level, for instance, hypothetically. Have you done that before? Have you built those relationships with doctors where you've got them on like speed text and you can just reach out and shoot them a quick question? Or
Absolutely. And I think that's part of the relationship building that you have to do. I mean, what I've done is, maybe it's physicians who you are formally engaged with as like an advisory board member, but it shouldn't be just a formal meeting that you're having a touch point with them. So I think to me, those are the valuable ones. And, just for sake of argument, let's say you pick 12 or 15 people to have as a broad advisory board. You may not always be meeting with each of them, but you kind of rotate them in and out. And it's a bit of a challenge to engage with that many, but it's actually the quick touch points that help to kind of cement those bonds over time. And I found that can be very helpful, is those quick little touch points, just to keep people that, your company name is popping up. And that's important. Because typically the ones that you want, they're a valuable resource, and other companies are going to be reaching out to them too. So, you need to do your best to stay in front of them. And that's part of the process.
I think you make a good point, and it's kind of a broader marketing lesson, which is you sort of want to build, we call it an audience, but you want to build that community. You want to build that advisory group at the very early stages, almost before you really need to lean on it. And then once it's built, you want to keep the conversation going kind of on a semi-regular cadence, as opposed to, I have one question 6 months later, I've got another question 9 months later, and they feel less engaged, they feel less part of the process, and you're just kind of doing this drive-by. Whereas if you can continue to engage that community and that audience with conversations about the development, they feel more invested in the process too, which can help you in a number of ways. But it's the same thing with marketing too. You can't just go to the market and dump your product into it and expect that your audience or the community will just pick it up. You have to start
one
building
set of banner ads is not going to cut it, right?
Exactly.
It's a conversation, and you have to be able to build and have that conversation all along the way, right?
Yes. It's funny that you say one set of banner ads. We worked with a client a couple of years ago that there was a kind of a brand building, audience building part of the engagement, so that it was really about educating on the science and some of the new developments and process, so that when it came time to actually market and launch the product, that community, those early adopters, those people who were interested in solving that particular problem, they were ready. And we ran the audience building campaign, that brand building. And then the leadership team said, we've done enough marketing. Everybody's heard enough about us. No, it's not. You're not done. It was literally, I think, 2 videos sent out to the community.
Yeah, it's an ongoing communication, right? And it's physicians, especially if they're not hearing from you, they'll forget. Like they've got new messages coming in on whatever's latest and greatest that week, and that's an important part of the discussion. So it's a constant awareness. And back to our discussion about the advisory board, it's the same sort of thing. Like you've got to be there in front of them so that they don't forget about you. And that's where I've found you get the best insights, because so many times you're having a conversation and your initial focus is on some particular product development issue. Maybe you're working through a target product profile and you're not quite sure on a certain thing, so you want to get a point. And the physicians will have almost a throwaway comment of, oh, well, such and such happened to me the other day. And you're like, hold on, I need to know more about that. And you go down a whole separate track of discussion. And that's where the real learning comes from. And you only get that by having frequent touch points that help you get to those points.
I think what we see a lot of is, or hear a lot of, is pushback. It's so hard to engage with them. And I think it's because they just haven't experienced it. They just haven't been through the process yet. And yeah, it is hard to pull together a board of 15-person advisory board and coordinate them and bring them all to the table. But you don't need to get them all in at the same time. But you do need to be willing to engage. And in innovation, being able to be present and in person and observing the way that they may be operating, or the clinical setting, or maybe it's maybe it's the business side of the business that is
Mhm.
going to be a barrier to integrating whatever your new therapy or technology is. Being able to be present and active in the space, things change quickly, even though we think they don't. Having that feedback, having those conversations, is kind of a proxy. It's like you being there virtually, and it's a big opportunity. And I think that it's one that companies don't think about a lot.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. So you think about, okay, you're a new company. You're trying to, you have this goal of building this advisory board. How do you actually go about doing it? Frankly, you can't just get on the phone and call up a doctor and say, hey, will you join my advisory board? Like that doesn't work. You either
Right.
have to be introduced from somebody else, or you have to have some pre-existing connection. They have to know about you. So you have to find those ways in. How do you do that? Right? You could start to hire more folks in your team who maybe have direct experience in the space, who have those relationships. That's certainly a way to do it. Or you start to get those referrals from other people. That's another way to do it. Another, honestly, it's sort of sales 101. You have to go and show up in their office and build those connections and, ask them, hey, is it okay if I come back and spend, a little bit longer with you? Would you mind if I shadowed you for the day? Like those types of things. The doctors appreciate that you are willing to invest the time to learn about their patients and their sort of workflow in their clinics. And when they see you as willing to invest your time in them and understanding that, they're willing to invest in the time back. And that's how you build those relationships. It's not a sort of one shot transactional approach. Like it's never going to work that way.
Right.
And I think that goes a long way into the building that story. That's how back to our discussion about how do you build the story for investors? You first have to really understand your customers, and how do you do that is spending time with them.
I think when you can reference back to that experience, when you can have those conversations, you can document them, and then you work that into your roadmap, then you can reference that. And it goes from, well, I was building this in my garage mentality to, okay, well, maybe I started there, but along the way, I've done a couple of course corrections, and now we're headed this way because I've been engaged in the community, and I'm getting real, practitioner feedback on what we're doing and where we're going with this. I like that a
Absolutely, and
lot.
I think that adds that layer of credibility that we were talking about.
Right.
That it is not a straight line from here to there. Um, it's being able to explain, here's where we're going. I know we need to get here, but how you get there may be a winding path to actually get there. But you're learning those things along the way, and that's part of the credibility, is just understanding that that's how things work. Like if you go and present, this is a straight line from here to there, credibility starts to take a hit at that point.
Right. It's feedback and data.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
using that to drive, a better chance of success in a kind of a crazy market. All right, Dave, thank you so much. It's good talking to you again.
Sounds good. All right, Bill. Thanks.
So if you're a life science leader or product manager and you have an interesting story you'd like to share, reach out to me on LinkedIn and we'll connect. If you're interested in learning some other lessons in marketing for life sciences or in avoiding some of the big mistakes, I cover a lot of that in my LinkedIn newsletter. So I'll drop the links to those in the description below. That's it. That's the end.